They've been to our church before. I think this is the second time they've come to our church, so it's great to have them here. And as a little introduction to my brother, as many of you know, my brother is a lawyer. He's been a lawyer for the last 30 years or whatever. He's an injury.
I'm explaining it myself.
Okay. So he's a lawyer who's always been connected to the church, involved in the church, not only the son of a priest, but he's been involved in the activities of the church. He was a parish council president for many years. He is presently the stewardship chairman at the annual Greek festival that they have, where they get 10,000 people. My brother Nico's in charge of all the trash. He collects all the trash.
And busboys.
And busboys. So he stays involved in many different ways. But he's a person of faith, and many of you have read his poetry that I put in the light over the last couple of years. And it's beautiful because he reflects on aspects of life, but then you see the faith that he has, and what the meaning of faith and how the faith is given direction and meaning in his life. So he's going to give 2 talks today, and he doesn't want to just be talking the whole time. He said he wants this to be interactive, so feel free if you have something to say, if you have a question to ask or a comment to offer, don't hesitate to offer. We want this to be interactive, we want this to be inspiring, educational, and interesting for all of us. So he's going to give 2 talks. The first talk I simply labeled The Journey of Life. So he'll explain to you what he's going to talk about in the first talk. And then the second talk will be The Joy of Giving. So anyway, we want to welcome Nico. Thank you very much for being here. Together with Sue and Rachel. And thank you all for coming.
I don't think an introduction is necessary. All you have to do is look at us. We all start off with a lot of hair and smaller noses, and as we get in our 40s and 50s, we all lose our hair and have big noses. And my brother George is the same. Now, I wanted to start out, I was going to start out with a poem, but we did have a prayer service, but I'm going to still do my poem that I wrote for Lent. Some of you may have read it. I just wrote it a couple weeks ago. It's called Silence. In the modern world, it remains elusive. The mind is blitzed with images most intrusive. Sex, food, and toys preoccupy our soul. Talking heads on TV give us no lull. Few take the time to pray and seek true knowledge. Instead, we are obsessed with our iPhones in college. We proclaim to our friends that we are so busy, yet our time is consumed by things that make us dizzy. We gossip and talk before we think clearly, causing conflict and hurting some severely. Few pause to see the beauty of the world. So caught up in ourselves, we become unfurled. We seek meds and drink wine to feel inner peace, when simple silence would help us find that release. If only we slowed down to examine our behavior, we would improve our lives and feel the peace of our Savior. And I'm a lawyer, and I'm a personal injury lawyer, and I will tell you, people think I'm crazy writing poetry. Some of my lawyer friends who have never seen that side of me say to me, "Are you terminally ill? Are you okay? Are you all right?" Because they see me as this aggressive lawyer, and I will tell you, I don't know if Luke shows it because he's a nice guy, but all the Veronises can be a little aggressive. We grew up very competitive. We used to go on vacations together at Skytop, and we'd compete in basketball and tennis and bowling and pool and ping pong. And by the end of 4 days, we couldn't stand each other, and we needed a real vacation. But thank you for coming on this Saturday morning. We got 1 inch of rain in Pennsylvania. We've got like 5 inches of snow all winter. And it's amazing to me to see 25, 30 people here when you have 1 or 2 feet of snow. And to come out on a valuable time on Saturday morning, I appreciate you coming out. Now, I'm a lawyer. I could talk all day. That's my profession. But like I said, if you want to interject or have an idea with something I say, feel free to offer your comments. Now listen, the reason I put this guy up here, that's George. I'm the oldest and the shortest. George is the second, 6'3", Luke's the third. George was supposed to be here. He said, yeah, I'm going to give a good talk, an inspiring talk. George is a better talker than I am. He's funnier, he's a better talker, I'm a better writer. Unfortunately, George backed out because George is the second born. He's always backed out. When we grew up, on a Saturday morning, my dad would get us up for an obscure Saints' Day service. We were 6 and 7 to serve as altar boys. One of us served, and one of us named George always slept in. So that's George. And my mom says, George, we still don't know what George does. We know he sells, and he sells a lot of things to people who don't need the things he sells. But my mom always says, please, when you find out what George does, could you please tell me? She's worried about it. Now, I want to say one thing before I start my comments. Now, Luke created these titles. Luke created these titles. This is Faith, and I'm very proud of her. If you're a New England Patriot fan, could you please stand? Well, there's not much courage left. I just want to thank you. I'm 58 years old. The Eagles have not won the NFL since 1960, the year I was born. I thank you very much for giving us one Super Bowl. And I want to especially say that to beat the best, New England's the best. Coach Belichick, to beat Coach Belichick, Tom Brady, the Gronk, that brought Philadelphia so much pride to win one. And I thank you for your kindness. Now, I want to say this, because I really mean this. Luke, I read Luke's sermons. You hear Luke's sermons. Luke is by far, of the three brothers, the most spiritually advanced. I'm not that spiritually advanced. I started writing poetry because it makes up for my lack of prayer. I should be praying more, but instead I write poetry. And I consider that partially my prayers. But Luke is the most spiritually mature. So when he invited me and George to come up and speak, I was a little apprehensive. I have never led a retreat, never talked in this sense. I talked to my wife's her Bible study group. She calls it a Bible study group. It's really a woman's support group. They're all over 50, and they go and talk about how their husbands could be better men if they did this. But they call it a Bible study. And that's the share of a Bible study. So anyway, so I wanted to say, some people said, why did you start writing poetry? Well, the simple reason is this. That's Luke. He travels 5 hours to see football games in Philly. Nobody's saying does that. And, now, I'm musings of a preacher, so I just wanted to show you. This is the preacher in his prime, and this is the son. That's me when I was a little kid. And that's me with my older dogs, and I'm going to get to them in a minute. But I wrote, the reason I'm showing you this dog is Teddy. I have two poodles, or I had two poodles, and they were 16 and a half last year. And about a year ago, they started slowing up and started getting old and we knew the end was near. And I took these dogs every single morning for probably 14 of the 16 years to the minute market called Turkey Hill, and I would split an egg sausage sandwich with them every single morning when I had my coffee. And people would say to me, "You're killing your dogs." I go, "They're 16 and a half. They lived a long life." But the reason I say that is when they got old, they started having bowel problems, and my wife was having a fit because they would just go in the house anywhere they wanted. And they started getting me up at 4:30 a.m. And 4:30 a.m. and I usually get up at 6 or 6:30, and I didn't know what to do with my time. So after I took them to the minute market, I'd come back and sit with them, and I started thinking. I started thinking about my life. I started thinking about what I've done. You know, I've been a lawyer for 32 years. I've made money. I've been successful. I've handled a lot of good cases. But I still didn't have total meaning in my life. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to start writing about everything I observe. Human nature, human vices, the beauty of the world, dogs, elephants, anything I think of, I write poetry. And it's sort of my quiet time, it's my soothing time to help me see what's really important. Secondly, but I do want to say this. Luke invited me. I'm not a wise man, and I never proclaim to be a wise man. And I want you to know that just like you know, I have my vices. My wife certainly knows my vices. I mean, I say this and because I want you to know that there's nothing special about me. But, you know, I like to buy fancy cars, and I like to go play blackjack once a month with my friends. And sometimes I drink too much wine and beer, and my wife says I become too flirtatious when I do that. And I've even been known to say something inappropriate from time to time. And as you know, in these sexually charged times, you got to be real careful what you say. So I just want you to know that I keep fighting and try to fight the good fight of faith, but I make a lot of mistakes along the way, just like we all do. Secondly, you know, my poetry helps me deal with this crazy world. I think we all agree we're living in strange times. People always ask me, how's business? And I said, has human behavior gotten better? With all our technology, you know, I'm telling you, human behavior has not improved. We've allowed our human vices and weaknesses to cause a lot of distress. We've allowed our dysfunctional politics. I don't care if you're on the right, on the left, or in the middle. Our politics, our system is broken. We've allowed our greed, our obsession with material wealth, our economic classes, and our prejudices, we've allowed that to divide us more in this country since this country's been divided since the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights era. And I think, how many in this room have a good friend or a person you admire who you've lost respect for or see differently because their political views are different than yourselves? Raise your hand. I mean, it's frightening. It's frightening. You know, we're bombarded with fake news and legitimate news. Fake news and real news, depending on who you want to watch. And let's face it, if you're conservative, you think Fox News is the truth. One of my friends came up to me the other day and said, Nico, the only truth is on Fox. And I said, okay, well, do you think there's any truth on CNN or MSNBC? And he goes, nothing. The only truth is on Fox. And, you know, I said to him, well, John, I'm not sure I can agree with that. I think there's some truth there. There's some truth in CNN. There's some truth in that. But everybody portrays, they look for their own truth. And, you know, with the internet, we can find anything we believe, we can find support for it on the internet. And that's the problem. The truth is somewhere in the wind. It's elusive. But we're bombarded by so many lies, so much misinformation, and we all become self-righteous, and we're all a little hypocritical. We all, even religious people. The people on the right, they think that they have all the answers, and that people on the left are crazy. And people on the left think that people on the right are crazy. And we're just living in these times. And, you know, social media, Facebook, Instagram, they flame the fire more than ever. And how many of us are consumed by our cell phones, electronic gadgets? I look at my cell phone, and my wife looks at her cell phone. Oh, yeah, here. I was out to dinner the other night with my wife and her friend, and they were on the sidewalk, and we were trying to get their attention, and they were looking at their cell phones. And I thought to myself, don't we all do that a little bit? I do it myself. All downtime. We can't have a spare moment where we're not looking down. When we should be looking up for inspiration, we're looking down.
Are they texting each other?
Very possible. Because they would have to look each other in the face. That's a good one. And you know, I was talking to my granddaughter the other day. She's big on guns. And my goddaughter, I don't have a granddaughter yet. Keep working. My goddaughter is big on guns. And I was saying to her, I was teasing her a little. I said, do you think we need all these assault rifles, AK-45s, AR-15s? Don't you think we can have guns but not these crazy guns? Just have some sensible gun control. She said, no, that's crazy. I said, name one reason we need these assault weapons. And she said, for hunting. I almost fell over. I said, if you're hunting with machine guns or assault rifles, Then I have another problem with you, Maria. I said, but I wanted to show her I'm objective. So I pulled up this old picture of me and George. My mom, the presbyter, apparently supplied us with guns years ago to guard the church. And remember what I said about my second board? The second board, no clue about gun safety. He's ready to shoot himself or me in the leg. So anyway, you know, our leaders in both parties are lost. Let's face it, we all know that money rules, self-interest rules, and until we revise or reform our system, our politics, it's always going to be the same. When the Trump era is over, you'll probably get more liberal people back in control, and they're going to be in some ways just as bad or just as good, depending on your point of view. You know, the superpowers, we're threatening to obliterate each other with nuclear weapons. I mean, you have this crazy guy in North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and he is scary because the guy doesn't care about anything but keeping his power. And so he keeps his power with these nuclear weapons. So you got to be tough, but you got to find that fine line so we don't start a nuclear war. You know, I read 3 newspapers every morning, and it raises my anxiety level every morning when I read them. And yet, we baby boomers and people older still like our newspapers. I keep reading them every morning. So I turned to poetry, and I want to share with you another poem I wrote. It's about modern times. And, you know, I try to make it a little interesting today. I don't want to bore you, but I wanted to intersperse some of my new poetry. The book you have is my older poetry the last few years. I'm writing a new book now, which you will get with some of my newer poetry. But this one is called Modern Times. I think it captures where we're at in this country. Our waking hours are consumed by a smartphone, while our children play with games that kill and moan. Kill and moan meaning the games, the video games, and also the pornography. We eat and drink with no thought or moderation, ignoring our body's expanding transformation. We buy things we don't need, based on ads from which we feed. We spend less time listening to one another, instead hating and fearing our dark-skinned brother. We take our health for granted until it is lost, and then turn to drugs with frequency and cost. We desecrate our bodies with piercings and tattoos, thinking it will enhance our image with more views. Our leaders talk and tweet with little wisdom or thought, lobbyists scheme to sway politicians who are bought. Despite obscene debt, we spend like there's no tomorrow, and kill our animals and earth with no care or sorrow. While a few live lavish lives of wealth, millions starve and suffer with poor health. It seems that only common sense will be regained when God returns in glory to restore sanity and reign. And, you know, it makes me think, the way we are these days, that we all sometimes have that little inkling that the second coming could be coming a lot sooner than we know, or maybe one. But, you know, in a nutshell, I think you'll agree with me that a lot of our problems stem from human pride, human ego. Anybody know what ego stands for? Anybody ever hear this? Ego stands for edging God out. And when I saw that, I thought, if you take nothing away, remember that. When we edge God out in politics, in government, in law, in medicine, whatever field of study, we lose out. And, you know, I like some of the conservative commentary when they say, you've all read that, when it says, well, what do you think we were going to turn into? We kicked God out of our schools. We kicked the 10 Commandments out of our schools. We kicked out religion out of our schools. And yet we expect God to come save us when some crazies go and shoot up the schools. And I don't always agree with the political bent, but I think that's partially true, if you want to be honest about it. You know, and I think the other problem is it's our belief that we can solve our own problems. And I know many people in this room, you're inspired by my brother. He's an exceptional preacher. He's a good priest. And I'm amazed what you have done. And I know a lot of you in this room have been part of all the progress in this church. And, you know, you've done that because of the Spirit of God, and you've been inspired by Luke's ministry and this church. And I thank you for that. Lastly, I wrote poetry because I want to leave a legacy to my children. You know, we all want to leave our children a little money, some things they can use, help them out, get started in life. But I wanted to leave more than that. I wanted to leave something. So if I die, we have a friend this week, 44 years old. He's a doctor with a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old. He went skiing in Lake Placid, and just as he got on the ski slope, he fell over with a massive heart attack. This week, in fact. And that's what can happen to any of us in this room. And you know, yet we live like we're going to all live to be 80 or 90 years old. And he died this week. And I thought to myself, you know, this is why we need to enjoy the present. This is why we have to have God in our life. And we went to his funeral, and it's heartbreaking to see his family. They didn't have a chance to say goodbye to him. He was a strong, real fit person. So when I die, I want to be able to leave my kids something. So if I die of a heart attack today or tomorrow, my daughter and son, my grandkids, my nieces and nephews, they can pick up one of my books and say, who was this guy? My grandchildren, if I never meet him, oh, this is what he was about. And they can read my poetry. They'll long forget I was a lawyer. There's a ton of lawyers, that doesn't mean anything. But if they remember something I said productive in that book, I'm a happy man. So, I want to tell you an interesting story. There's a man in our church. He happens to be named George, but it's not my brother. He's in his 80s. And George said to me the other day, he's been a good Christian, a supporter of the church. He supported my brother and dad's mission trips and whatever. And he says to me all the time, you know what, Nico? I hate to say this, but it's 100% true. The only good Muslim is a dead Muslim. And I'm like, all Muslims? He says, all Muslims. Are you talking about the guys who are terrorists? All Muslims. The only good Muslims that I go, George, how can you say that? You've grown up in this church, you know the Christian doctrine. I said, I'm appalled. He says, you may be appalled, but I'm telling you, that's the truth. And I said, what happened to this man? But I attribute it to the times. I mean, he has become so hardened. There's a little evil in his heart. And I hope and pray that he changes before he dies. But he led me to think. My daughter, when she was writing an essay for college, she said, what should I write about? I said, why don't you write about something of gratitude, about how lucky you were to be born and raised in this country. So she wrote, I hit the lottery when I was born. And she hit the lottery in a couple ways, and many of your families have hit the lottery too. Not only were they raised in this country, but you come from stable homes where you have parents who care, parents who are secure. I mean, Rachel teaches in West Philadelphia now, and most of those kids have a single parent. And one of them, she told me a story once, there were 11 kids. The little girl came in, there were 11 kids, and she was one of 11, and her mother had these kids to like 6 different men. And Rachel would give her a lot of attention, and she would ask Rachel, Mrs. Veronis, could you adopt me? Could you take me home? She said, you're an angel. And I never forgot that, because here's a little girl who just, a matter of bad circumstances, grew up in a ghetto in West Philly to a mother who's had 11 children to 6 different men. And this poor little child, who is no different than any of our children because of where she was born. And I said to my friend George, how can you say that? If you were born in Palestine, if you were born in Saudi Arabia, if you were born in Iran and Iraq, you may not like it, but you wouldn't know any better. You'd be born a Muslim. That's just a matter of fate. So how can you condemn all Muslims? Let me tell you the truth. We're Greek Orthodox or Albanian Orthodox, Romanian, and we believe our faith is the original faith. But I've always said, if I were born a Jew, I'd probably be a Jew. If I was born a Muslim, I'd probably be a Muslim. So we never can be in a position to condemn or judge other people because we don't know their story. And that's, I keep telling George that, but he keeps saying that about the Muslims. I wanted, how many here are immigrants or children of immigrants? Raise your hand. Okay, well that's good. Well, here's the irony. I was born in Greece. George was born in Greece. My parents were born here. Well, my dad was studying to be a priest And he went to the University of Athens to perfect his Greek, and we always tease him and say, you were doing more than studying because me and George were born. And so, somebody done that. That's, wait, inappropriate? So anyway, because we're all immigrants, you know, this whole immigration issue, and I'm not going to get into politics, but I wrote a poem on immigrants, because immigrants, to me, are what made this country great from the beginning. I mean, we're great because we come from Greece, Albania, Italy, Romania, Russia, you know, Israel, wherever we come from. We all come and we offer our talents and strengths. So I wrote a story in honor of my grandfather. He was an immigrant who came here, a very intelligent person, but never educated. He worked in a fur factory in Easton, and every day he came home, his hands were bloody from cutting up the furs back in the day. And he hated his work. But he worked and worked because he wanted all 6 kids to be educated. And all 6 kids, my dad became a priest, one was a professor at Yale, one became a multimillionaire investment banker, one was president of CBS magazines, one was another teacher. They all excelled because their father sacrificed. And he didn't like his life, but when he saw how his kids turned out, it made it. So it inspired my poem, The Immigrant. Let me read it to you because I think it applies to many of us. The immigrant, living a life of hardship and strife. The foreign man seeks a better life. Traveling with his family and sole possessions, he dreams of faraway mansions. By the way, this is my mom and all the children when they were immigrants. He dreams of comfort and faraway mansions, hoping his children will be taught in fine schools. He employs his strong work ethic and plays by the rules. Incessantly mocked for his color, customs, and traits, he endures curses of derision and simmering hate. Back in the old days, wop, spick, and dirty Greek, the ignorant exclaim, yet he maintains his composure and hides his disdain. Determined to prevail, he ignores chance to go home, knowing in his heart he will no longer roam. Despite hours of toil in dark, smelly places, he discovers infinite joy in his family's faces. When his children graduate with honors and a future of less pain, he beams with pride, knowing his life was not spent in vain. No longer hungry, cold and misplaced, he praises the Lord for his newfound place. The immigrant's story is much of the key to America's greatness and a land of the free. So, I think we all need to remember the contribution the immigrant made, and in this modern day debate on immigration and illegal immigration, let's not forget there's also a positive side to immigration. You know, when we succeed in life, and many of us have succeeded in business, some of us have restaurants, some of us are doctors, lawyers, some of us have just succeeded because we have a great work ethic. But the great work ethic comes from our parents. It comes from our mentors. Many people in this country grow up with no work ethic because their parents are on welfare, their grandparents are on welfare. They have never known better or seen better. And it's easy to criticize those people, but I always think to myself, do we give ourselves too much credit for our success? Because I think success is based as much on circumstances and opportunities as it is on talent and work ethic. And some of us, especially some of us coming from Albania, you know that there was no opportunity in Albania. The system crushed opportunity. And, you know, the communist system and the dictator Hoxha. And so, you know, I think to myself, yes, I've made some money and I've succeeded, but I can't seriously give myself that much credit. And I think sometimes we in this country give ourselves too much credit and don't consider the circumstances. It makes me remember the maxim, true success in life is not necessarily just how much you've accomplished, but what challenges and obstacles you have had to overcome to reach your goals. And isn't that true? I mean, Some people, my partner, Hegelgans, my law firm's Hegelgans and Veronis, my partner's 2 years older than me. He came from a dysfunctional family. His dad was a raging alcoholic. He never made more than $25,000 a year. He beat his mother. He beat the kids. My partner is not an athlete. The Veronis, we were athletes, but he was not. He was what I call last pick in gym class. But his dad wanted him to play football for Notre Dame. And he always put pressure on the kid. Why are you such a loser? Why are you such a bad athlete? Why can't you play football for the high school team? The kid had no hand-eye coordination. And it affected him all his life. And he's still scarred by that. But he was the only guy who stayed in school despite all the abuse he took in his home. He went to college, did well, went to law school, did very well, graduated, and has made something of himself. But he's a pain in the butt. He's my partner. He has a lot of idiosyncrasies. He has trouble making decisions. He's obsessive compulsive. He's 150 pounds. I'm 205 on a good day. He's 150 pounds. He eats 3 carrots, 2 celeries, and a tuna fish every day. And if I walk in and take a bite of one of his carrots, it ruins his day. And the bully that I am, I sometimes do that. But the point I'm trying to make is this guy succeeded despite all the obstacles he had, and he's done well in life. Now, I'm not a poet. You know, this poetry I write, I wasn't trained formally. So I have another lawyer in my firm. She's very intelligent, a good writer, really smart. But she's not real secure on herself. She says to me one day, you know what? Your poetry, you have a good use of words, but it's not perfectly metered, and it doesn't always, connect with me. And I said, do you write? She goes, oh yeah, I write. I'm a good writer. This I go, I never saw anything you wrote. She says, oh, I'm not going to show you what I write. She says, I'm not secure enough to show you what I write. And I said, and I thought to myself, here's a girl who's criticizing my poetry, but she's afraid to show her own product. And it reminded me of the comment and what I read once. If you wait until you're perfect to live, to express yourself, to share your ideas, your talents, your gifts with your community, with your church, with your world, no one will ever hear from you. We're all flawed. I agree, some of my poetry is okay, some of it isn't as good, but I enjoy writing it, it's meaningful to me. And I said to her, Laura, poetry is like art. Go to the Barnes & Noble, read the poetry. You're going to read poetry you don't even understand. And no one's going to... I try to write my poetry so you understand it. It's simple. The other day I was in my church, and I'm an usher, and I was, this changes the subject, but I was walking down, and this one woman who hadn't been in church in a while, I saw her, and I said, another Maria, I said, Maria, so nice to see you. But I haven't seen your kids in a while, she says. You're not going to see my kids. My kids say that the only people that come to church are hypocrites. Now, my first reaction as a priest son was to get defensive and defend the church at all costs with my guns. And I did not. I thought for a second, and I said, I'm not going to take that approach. And I said, Maria, they're right. I know. The church is full of hypocrites, but we're all hypocrites. And your kids saying that, they're displaying hypocrisy by just saying that. We come to church because we have a lot of vices and failures and weaknesses. We come to church, and if some of us are hypocrites from time to time, we come to church to be less hypocritical. So that's why they should be coming to church, not, putting down the church and its people. Let's face it, all our institutions, law, politics, medicine, it's all driven by money. There's hypocrisy in everything. So, reminds me of the story, there was a small town lawyer, and he had a difficult case, and he was saying, he was arguing in front of this very arrogant judge, and the judge interrupted him and tried to show his learned self, and he said, Counselor, surely your clients are aware of the doctrine of de minimis non curat lex as a defense to their case. The startled lawyer replied suavely, I can assure you, Your Honor, that in the small town where my clients live, it forms the sole topic of conversation. By the way, that's a Latin term, for the law does not concern itself with trifles. So one of the things I learned as a lawyer is don't come out and talk with all your baloney and the words you learned in law school. Nobody wants to hear a lawyer until they need one. But people don't like to hear lawyers talk all high and mighty. So one of the best lawyers I trained under in Philly when I first started my career in the 1980s, I was making some kind of argument, telling why it was negligence and the injuries were causally related to the negligence of this tortfeasor. And he goes, Nika, please, talk like a regular person. Just remember, in all your arguments, keep it simple, stupid, KISS. So I never forgot that. Because if you go in front of a jury and talk like that, they're going to think, one, you're an idiot, and two, you're going to lose your case. There was a lawyer in the 80s, I was right out of law school, and I didn't know what I was doing, and this boss was lazy, and he'd send me to all these high-powered hearings and say, just wing it, this is how you learn. So I went to this one lawyer's office once, and he was a Jewish lawyer who had made millions of dollars. He was one of the most arrogant lawyers in Philadelphia. And I was right out of law school, so I was just a kid. So I walk in with my client, I'm ready to question his client. And I start asking all these valid questions. Where'd you go to school? What kind of work have you done the last 10 years? Describe your injury. This lawyer, objection, 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 objection. So I knew he was a difficult man. So I was not young and naive, and I said to him, Mr. Schwartz, stop it. You're a bigger asshole than your reputation. And this guy, I can't believe I said that, but that's my competitive side. Coming out of college or law school, I didn't know better. You don't talk like that. The guy got up, and he was a Jewish guy, but he was like 6'4". And he got up and he said, court reporter, I'd like you to note everything he just said, and I'd like to challenge Mr. Veronis to a boxing match in any playground of his choice in Philadelphia. So rather than accelerate this disaster, I said to myself, you got to try a different approach. So I said, Mr. Schwartz, I know you're a great lawyer. You've collected millions for your clients. You're one of the most famous lawyers in Philly, and I know all that, and I apologize for my remark. But you also know that the questions I'm asking are legitimate questions, and you're just bullying me because I'm a young lawyer, and you're trying to show for your client how good a lawyer you are. I know you're a good lawyer. Your client knows you're a good lawyer. So if you allow me, I'd like to finish my deposition without all the objections. And you know what? As soon as I gave him a little praise, acknowledged that he was the better lawyer, the more experienced lawyer, he let me finish the deposition without another single objection. So that's how you learn. And there was another lawyer, one more lawyer in Philly, his name was Jim Beasley, and he was a street lawyer. And we did medical malpractice defense. That's what my job was. The doctors were sued all the time in Philly. My job was to defend them. The problem was, when you go to prepare the doctors, they hate me as much as the other lawyer because the whole thing, they don't want anything to do with any of it. So they treat me almost as hostile as their lawyer. The doctor, we got to prepare for this. So this lawyer, Jim Beasley, he represented the victims of serious malpractice cases. And the first case I had with him, we went to trial with my boss. My job was to carry the bags back then, do all the written work and just train. And this lawyer started getting up, and he spoke like no lawyer I ever heard. He says, how do you say, friends of the jury, this doctor, he's a good man. He's well-intended, he's a nice guy. I'm sure he's been a stellar doctor most of his career. But you know what? He made a mistake in this case. And the mistake was so bad that my client is paralyzed. She won't walk for the rest of her life. That's how he spoke. And it wasn't, not eloquent, it wasn't legal, but he knew how to talk like the guy on the street. He told the story just like he would in Northeast Philly. And you know what? The juries loved him. And then the defense lawyer, my boss, a little clueless, would get up and he'd start arguing all these elaborate things in law or whatever. Well, luckily we settled the case before the end of the trial because he was going to lose millions of dollars on that one. But it reminded me again, by the way, this Jim Beasley, he was such a good guy that in the 90s, he made so much money, he gave $25 million to Temple Law School, and they named it, it's now called the James Beasley School of Law. But I learned more just watching that man than any other lawyer I ever trained under. Now, you bored yet? When you're bored, just put your hand up and I'll end it. Some of the themes of my poetry obviously are animals. I love animals. Who has a dog in here? Raise your hand if you have a dog. Okay, well, I'll make it back. I love elephants. Dogs are my favorite animal. My 2 dogs died last year. I forgot to finish that story. And my wife, she likes dogs, but she doesn't love them all the time right away. So she didn't want a dog right away, and I really wanted dogs because my kids are gone. I have nothing but my poetry, my books. I have no dogs. I have one wife who sleeps in. I have so in the mornings I have nothing to do. So I really want a dog. So I tried to use my lawyerly skills. And one day I came home and announced, I have 3 acres of land. I came home and announced, Sue, I've ordered an elephant. That's my second favorite animal. And now the baby elephants are cute, but when they grow, if you have trouble picking up after a dog, wait till you see what they're like. So I was joking, of course, and she knew I was joking, but it worked. Because about a month later, she said, you know, I've been thinking, I'm okay with getting 2 more dogs. So I said, good decision, I'll cancel that elephant. And we ended up getting 2 new dogs. Here, for Christmas. They came for Christmas. The kids brought them home as a surprise. Of course, they were on my credit card, but it was still their gift. This is me with my dog that was 16 the day before I put him down, our last embrace. And this is the dogs that died, and this is my brother George's dog. And this is your priest, by the way. And I want to show one other picture. Oh, is there Jimmy John's around here? Yeah. Jimmy John's are a gourmet sandwich shop. They're popular in the Northeast in Pennsylvania. The only reason I show this picture is I don't want you to shop at Jimmy John's because he likes to kill rhinoceros and all these beautiful animals, and then he shows them off. Now here, he's naked on the shark. He may have other issues we don't know about. But that's I don't know what the deal is there. But, you know, when I was a little, I'd like the women to stop staring at that. That's my son. You know, when I was a young boy, I loved animals. I had mice, rabbits, fish, dogs, cats, everything you could think of. And we started playing football. I was 12 years old, and I'm the oldest of the 3 boys. We're playing football. My parents said, no, we don't want you playing football. It's too dangerous. Play soccer. I said, Mom, we're playing football. So my brothers were so proud of me. I went out for football, put on the helmets. I was a little skinny kid, and I went, I got hit around. And after one day I came home, I was all banged up, and I thought, man, this might not have been such a good idea, but I didn't want to admit it. So my mom, she knew how much I loved animals. So back then, remember those little turtles that kids had? Yeah. She said, Nico, we've been thinking. Sort of the same manipulation I use with my wife. If you give up football, we'll get you 2 new turtles. Before I got home that day, I had given up football, handed in my helmet and shoulder pads, and I was the owner of 2 new pet turtles. And the sad thing is, they escaped a week later. We couldn't find them anywhere, and about 2 months later, we found them shriveled up in a closet. I accused my dad of killing them, and he's crazy. So anyway, I mean, to me a dog is the most beautiful creature because a dog is the closest animal to unconditional love. And because I've been talking a lot, I'm not going to read the poem of Dog, but if you want to read it, it's in the first page of my book. Another theme I cover a lot in life is with a lot of my friends and people I know who've already passed who are younger than me. I mean, I'm 58, and I used to think to myself, I'm born in 1960, so when 1980 came around, or 1990, I said, no problem. I'm not 40 till the year 2000. That'll never come. It came and went. I was 40. Then I was 50. Then I started thinking, whoa, this is going way too fast. And the kids are gone. And you know the feeling. When your kids are home, that 18 years when your kids are there, life's great because you're totally focused on what they want. You watch them play sports, you're with them, it's a great time in life. But then, all of a sudden, they graduate, and you think to yourself, well, wait a second, this wasn't supposed to happen that quickly. And you start thinking about your life and how quickly it's gone by. And now, I'm 58, my dad's 86 in September, and I'm thinking to myself, holy crow, all of a sudden I'm on deck to be the next old person in the family. And you don't know how it happened. So, one of my poems is about how life, the Bible says, man withers like a flower and passes like a dream. And when the trumpet sounds, the dead will rise as if in an earthquake to meet Christ. And, the one thing I do know is life is very fleeting. And I do want to read a poem I wrote, one of my early poems about fleeting life when I was thinking how it's going by way too fast. Fleeting life, oh life, how rapidly you pass, quietly like a solemn mass. Love and laughter we have had, far more good than bad. Caring parents passing on their faith, giving hope and comfort to our fallen race. Forget not to enjoy the finer things in life, like sons and daughters and a loving wife. Yet time is so fleeting that it waits for no man's roll, and has a way of humbling those who disregard its toll, giving strength to the young and wisdom to the old, knowing that in time we all return to the same fold. Let us not live in the future or dwell on the past. Seize instead the present so we do not miss the cast. Life moves forward without stopping as the moments tick away, hoping only that we use it in a most productive way. As God has warned, we must always be on the look. Our time to go is not recorded in any earthly book, for there may be little time for peace before he calls us to the great feast. So just a reminder that enjoy the moment, enjoy the day, because we don't know where we'll be tomorrow. Another topic is greed, money, and love of material things. I'm going to cover that a little later, give you a break from that topic now. Another interesting thing here is, fleeting life. This is Rachel. This cute blonde here, well, she's kind of a fake blonde, but this blonde here, as you can see, her real hair color. This is the oldest member of the family. He was the grandfather, and he's dead now. He was in his 90s.
Aww.
And this is Rachel. So when I wrote Fleeting Life, I thought that was an appropriate picture. And of course, I wrote a poem on aging too. You can read it in the book. I think it captures aging. Life is unpredictable. It can be kind and cruel, can change in a flash. We can't control, but we can only control how we face it. This man is one of my best friends, Pat Hazatonis. He looks like a Hasidic Jew because in the later years he let his hair grow out, and I always teased him that he was the only Hasidic Jew in our church. But he had a beautiful family, and Pat was 150 pounds before he got sick. He was my chemistry teacher in high school. A man, and Faith's too, a man who had a lot of influence in our lives. He was a very generous steward, a good man. And you know what happened to him? He ran 7 miles a day, never smoked, never drank any alcohol, ate fairly well. His only vice was he liked ice cream. He always ate ice cream. He got pancreatic cancer at the age of 64, died within 30 days, just a year and a half ago. So, you know, he was a man who always said when you greeted Pat, "Pat, how's it going? How are you?" He said, "I'm better than I deserve." That was his line, which is a great line. But he was humble, he was giving, and for reasons none of us will ever know, he was taken from us very, very quickly. And when he died, I just wrote, I want to read this poem because I think it applies to all of us. When I hear of a friend get sick or relative, I say, we offer our sorrow, and we say we're there, we're praying for you, and this. And yet, you know what I say? You know, it's his turn today, it's our turn tomorrow. None of us will escape illness or death, of course. So I wrote this on the illness. It comes on in a flash, this pertains to my friend, stunning life with a crash. Your first instinct is denial, then realism brings the trial. Life as you know it is put on hold as you grasp for miracles so bold. Spirituality becomes real as you realize the mundane is concealed. Loved ones shocked to learn the dark news, and your friends react as though confused. They try to offer a positive stance, but the words of solace do not enhance. Time slows down as if lost to the mind, as mortality becomes so defined. The future is no longer a concern, as the present becomes more precious, yet stern. You think back to all the joys you have had, realizing that they have outweighed the bad. You are thankful for the good years God has given, yet your soul yearns for hope and being forgiven. Although all people will face this inevitable time, when it comes, most recoil as if accused of a crime. No living being can escape its wrath when our time to go crosses our path. For the Christian, there is the promise of tomorrow, when we will be reunited without this sorrow. We do not perish in vain or leave our loved ones in despair, for we believe in the promise of eternal life so fair. So, when you think of someone who's suffering an illness, that's what comes to my mind about an illness that we can never take life for granted. And I wrote another poem on death. I'm not going to read more poems because time's passing, but there's a poem on death in there. You know, someone once said, don't be afraid of death. Be afraid of not living your life and using your time and talents and money the right way. That's what you should fear, not death itself. Finally, I'm going to end with one final topic. I have two topics. One is marriage. Those of us who are married know that marriage is challenging. Oh, that's Faith, by the way. Faith and Sue. Faith in her prime, with her 70s haircut. I think she went to rock concerts back then. I took her to a rock concert once with a guy she never met. She thanked me forever.
No, he was smoking pot the whole time.
He was, oh, I met a guy in business or law, and I said, he said,
it was just a traveling
no, he was
salesman.
traveling salesman, yeah, he traveled. And he came to the door, and he said, he wanted to hang out with me, and I said, I was going to go out with my wife to a concert, and I had 2 extra tickets, and I said, oh, I have a beautiful woman I can even hook you up with to get high with. And this was before Faith was even thinking of marrying a priest. So we had no idea. So we went to this concert, and Sue and I think we wandered off to kiss or make out or whatever, leaving Faith alone with this man. Next thing you know, the guy was smoking pot, offering it to Faith. So Faith comes running back in horror and asks me, now what am I supposed to do? And I took over and handled it from there. I think I ended up smoking pot with him and Faith went with Sue. No, that's not true. So one thing those of us who are married know, marriage is all about compromise, passion, and accepting each other for who we are, right? You know, if you have a big ego, staying married is tough. Remember, that's edging God out. And those of us who are married know darn well, if you don't know this when you get married, and I'm telling all the nieces and nephews, if you don't know this when you get married, you're going to learn it the first week. You're never changing the other person. You're just modifying their behavior in subtle ways over years. That's the best you're going to be able to do. And this is also advice to nieces and nephews. You also know, you guys are young, you're looking for someone pretty and hot, sexy and all that. Remember this, marriage is not just about finding that right person, but it's about being the right person. If you're the right person, your marriage will succeed, no matter who you find. Now you want to find someone married in a Greek Orthodox church, with good values, with a nice family, that all helps. But I just want you to know that being the right person is so much important than finding the right person. And I want to say this, I'm a type A personality, you can tell. You can tell my aggressive side by some of the things I've said. There's nothing that will humble a man more than a woman. And I say that sincerely. Whenever, I live in a fantasy world sometimes, and my wife will say, cut me a break. I want to be a king, a knight. I watch Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. I want to be an elf. I want to lead the armies and, do good. And then I ended up being a lawyer and I wanted to be a hero, right? So my wife will always bring me down to earth when she says, stop your dreaming. Peel the potatoes, clean the corn, do the dishes, kill that nasty fly in the kitchen, it's bothering me. And it quickly dashes my delusions of grandeur. And I'm once again just a simple lawyer living in Lancaster, accommodating my wife's desires. You know what? I'm gonna end here, but I want to just say one final thing.
This is so funny.
In law, people come to me and we give free initial consultation. That's what all personal injury do. And I always try to get their story to find out what's this person all about. And they'll tell me their story, and within 10 minutes, I know if they're legit, who they are, what their values are, whatever. And they tell me their story. They said, this is a slam dunk case. And I said, maybe. What do you mean maybe? I just told you all the facts. I said, well, I heard your side. Now I need to hear the other side, and then I'll determine what the truth is. Because we all know there's our side, the other side, and the truth. And when you're a lawyer, if you're just going to listen to one side, you're going to run into big trouble real quick. So, my friend says it better. She says, our friend, everyone's crazy except me and you, and I have some concerns about you. If true Christian values reign, the truth is we'd be out of business, and we lawyers would have a lot less work. So if we're to continue the erratic behavior, it's great for business. In summary, I'm going to leave you with these thoughts, which is kind of a summary of everything. Be positive. This is nieces and nephews. Put down your iPhone, Paul. This is the kind of impact I have. Now, Paul's a work in progress. These are our most challenging. I mean, be positive, embrace the present, be thankful for all the good in your lives. Never take yourself too seriously. In law, I see that more than ever. People think they're so high and mighty. Never take yourself too seriously because no one else does. Give honor to God, share your blessings, treat your partner and children like they are truly special on a daily basis. Put your cell phone down from time to time, and don't hesitate to use your time, talents, and resources for your church and community. And you know what? Each day we have a choice to make. We can be grateful and thankful for everything we have, or we can focus in on our problems, anxieties and worries, and let them consume us and control our lives. You decide how you want to live, and that's the end of my work.